afternoon, and welcome to the pre-agenda interview for Wednesday, March 19, 2025, relative to the appointment of Tammy Thompson as a member of the Housing Authority of City of Pittsburgh Board of Directors. Will the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill 1612, Resolution appointing Tammy Thompson as a member of the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh Board of Directors with a term to expire March 26, 2029.
For the record, we're joined by Councilman Charlin. Other members may join us shortly. What we would like to do, if you would just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested in serving on the board, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Council. My name is Tammy Thompson. I am currently serving as President and CEO of Catapult Greater Pittsburgh, which is a nonprofit organization situated in the city of Pittsburgh, serving all of Allegheny County, specifically creating intentional wealth and asset building opportunities for the residents of Pittsburgh. I'm back. Serving on the City of Pittsburgh Housing Authority is of interest to me because I have a history with the Housing Authority. As a longtime resident of the City of Pittsburgh, I spent some time living in public housing, and there were issues that existed 30 years ago that I believe still exist. I believe that people and the people who depend on the Housing Authority for their most basic need of housing deserve safe, affordable, stable housing. And that is my motivation for serving and bringing input that is both personal and professional to the agency.
Thank you. Councilman Charlin?
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
And thank you for coming in. I know we moved pretty quickly on that, so I appreciate you being able to accommodate our schedule here. I wanted to start off by, and a lot of these are the same questions like I asked yesterday to the other board members there, but unfortunately, we weren't able to make an efficient process. So I apologize for restating some of the things that I talked about yesterday. One major concern for me is that I have housing authority properties throughout my district in South Pittsburgh. And we no longer have any regional representation for any of the board members south of the river. So all the properties in my district, Councilman Coghill and Councilwoman Kell Smith's district, we don't have anyone from that whole area representing on the board. So I would want to know, how are you going to be able to serve all of the housing authority and not just not leave us unattended and unserviced like we often are?
Well, I'm not really sure how my appointment has anything to do with that. I will say that, as I stated, my work serves all of Allegheny County, and my interest is in all residents who are being serviced by the Housing Authority. So I don't think that's relevant. I have every intention of representing every member, every resident, and every human being who needs access to Housing Authority services. So maybe I'm not understanding your question.
Yeah, I mean, so, I drive through Arlington Heights every day, and I can see the issues that are happening in and out of Arlington Heights. If I don't drive through Arlington Heights, I have to drive by Caligari. And seeing the issues that are happening in those facilities, it certainly would be helpful to have someone who is versing themselves and ingratiating themselves in those communities, and not, Pittsburghers don't like crossing rivers, so not being afraid to cross the river and because it's not part of your daily routine.
Okay. I'm always open if you are riding through those communities and you have issues or points of interest that you would like us to address. I'm always open to meeting directly with you or any residents who have specific concerns, just like in any other area of the city.
Okay. I think what I would like to hear is that it would be like a concerted effort to make sure that board members are visiting places, outside of south of the river. That's
I would be open to visiting. I've never been asked to visit. I've never actually been asked to visit even in a previous term. But if residents need someone to come and listen, I'm always available to do that. But again, that being your district, if you have specific concerns or you're able to pull groups of people together who have concerns, I am always going to make myself available to listen.
okay. So I want to talk a little bit like what are your being appointed to the authority with experience on the authority already. What are your dreams for what the authority can be?
Yeah, I have a lot of dreams for what the authority should be. I think the authority should first and foremost be led by someone who has the experience to deal with development and contracts as necessary, but also have a very strong determination and will to make sure that the people who are residing and who depend on these services are also being cared for and being considered when decisions are made and being heard. As you mentioned, it's important that residents are heard. Mm-hmm. It's important that applications are moving in an efficient manner. And it's important that people are living in safe, stable housing.
So what would it, you're not coming in blind. What are the things that you would like to change with the authority when you take a seat there?
Well, first, and I don't think this is any secret, I've been speaking about this for quite a while. I think that first and foremost, in order to get to the things that we envision for the housing authority, we must have leadership changes that reflect exactly what I described when first answering this question. People who are efficient and effective from a business perspective, but also people who are intentional about humanity and serving people and making sure that they have dignity and respect in the homes that they live in.
So you don't believe the leadership is doing that now?
No, I do not.
Okay. So you'll be looking to change the leadership there?
Absolutely.
Okay. I mentioned earlier there's a 90-day notification that's required for a change in leadership at the housing authority. We are within the 90-day period. Do you have any idea on what that's going to cost the authority to?
Well, I think that there's a contract period, first of all. So, and because I haven't had a chance to discuss with other members of the commission, I'm not sure when contract periods end. I don't know. So I've been here for a week, so I have a lot of catching up to do. So I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that question.
Okay. And can you tell me what led to you leaving the authority previously?
Yes, I was frustrated with Castor Binion's contract being renewed.
Just the period?
Period.
Okay. Oh, contract period. Not. I thought you meant period, like period term. You mean
the term of the contract being renewed was a problem for me.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate that, my big thing, I have 4 major facilities, one of which doesn't really have any issues, like embarrassingly so. Whenever I visit there, they're like, everything's good. We've got nothing, but 3 that have major issues. And we had strong tenant councils in all of our facilities before the pandemic. After the pandemic, not so much. So we've been working really hard to try to build up strong tenants
I
councils.
think that's important.
I've got a pizza party at I think 4 o'clock at Caligari today to try to get some people out and get them excited about running. But those are the things that we need in our facilities. And I know, as I said yesterday, there's HUD restrictions on what actually is a tenants council. It's really hard to create that. And it's, you're very similar to PWSA or any of the other utilities we work with. You're a very heavily regulated authority. There's not, you can't do everything that you dream of because sometimes HUD says no.
That's right.
So we need a strong housing authority. Definitely want to see what can happen in those facilities, both with our facilities and the folks that are on HCV programs, and which, both myself and I should say all of us have a lot of. So, I hope to see you out and engaged with all of our residents here.
I concur, and I welcome working directly with city council members who also have a responsibility to making sure that they're speaking up for the residents in their district. So I look forward to working directly with you with any concerns that you have that can be addressed at the board level.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman?
Thank you. Councilman Warwick?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here. So you were on the board and left. What makes you want to come back now?
Well, I was asked.
Yeah?
I was asked to come back.
Okay.
I believe that we are nearing the end of the current director's contract, and I think it's important that I finish what I started. I believe that my experience, both personally and professionally, brings a unique perspective, and I would like to have some thoughts, some action towards helping to create the housing authority that I think we deserve in the city.
Yeah, and I'm also going to ask some questions that I asked the other day. So just in terms of, I know I have this at Glen Hazel, right? These third-party management companies that are not being held accountable by the housing authority. So what can we do? And it's not just management; it's also landlords when it's voucher, just tenant-based vouchers. What can the housing authority do to hold these management companies accountable, hold these landlords who, whether it's one or two units or a large building, when the payments are coming from HUD, like the money is coming from HUD. And so it's, cutting off the money is not necessary, so what can the housing authority do to hold folks accountable?
Yeah, I
for the
think we have to
conditions?
start with how we can hold the housing authority accountable, right? It's challenging to expect an agency, an authority to hold itself accountable. We need multiple voices to hold the agency as a whole accountable. We need to empower residents and people who participate in those programs, empower them to hold the agency accountable. I think it's a dual role. It's not something that the board can do alone. I would love to see council members helping, in possibly even introducing legislation that helps to hold the housing authority accountable for its mission. And I'll be honest, I haven't seen a lot of that in my past experience with the board. It feels like the agency was working in a silo, and that can't happen because they're not going to hold themselves accountable. HUD is not producing enough oversight to give them any reason to want to do anything different. If they're continuing to get paid, right? And so you're right. All of these, you're speaking my language. I think we have to find ways to, first of all, start with leadership that is open to being held accountable, and that is focused on doing what's right for the residents, while also, again, we understand it's a business. It has to be treated as a business, but there are people who are depending on this business to run effectively and efficiently. And I think that we need more than one group of people holding the authority accountable. So again, I'm welcoming, hoping that there will be more hands on deck paying attention and looking to hold the agency accountable.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, in terms of legislation, obviously, I always say this to folks, like, if you have ideas for legislation, let us know.
Absolutely.
Like, we're, happy to, help with that. We don't always know what needs to happen, though,
Yes.
so, and of course, we know that given the situation in Washington with the Trump administration, that HUD is going to become even smaller
Absolutely.
and even more distant. So we aren't going to be able to rely on HUD to,
Well, we don't know that yet.
Well, we don't
Hopefully
know,
some of those
but-
changes will improve
maybe.
the housing authority,
We'll
right?
see,
That's
but-
what we have to hope
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, we'll see. So, just in terms, so you mentioned contracts and developments, and of course, that's one thing that everyone always says about Director Binion, he's very good at contract. He's very, so, again, I don't really have details around that. That's just sort of what I've heard, right?
That's what I've heard as well.
Yeah, but at the same time, we are currently, in conversations around inclusionary zoning and trying to get market rate developers to include affordable housing. And we of course know that if they would just take vouchers, right? If all the landlords in Pittsburgh, including our developers, would just take the vouchers that people already have, we probably arguably wouldn't even have an affordable housing crisis, right? Because people would just be able to use the government funding that they have in hand to, rent apartments and rent units, but those developers and a number of landlords, right, will say, and we know that there's the stigma around voucher holders, and I suspect that is a big part of it, just the, but what they will say and what they do say is, oh, the housing authority is just so hard to deal with. And we also know that the housing authority can be very hard to deal with
Absolutely.
if you're doing a project-based voucher that, if you have, that with payments that aren't getting made and just sort of the hassle. Now, it's something that our affordable housing partners just deal with, right? And something that our sort of, we'll call them like our slum landlords just deal with, because they know that they're not being held accountable. So it's just, it's worth the wait, so to speak, it's worth the wait. So what can the housing authority do to streamline that process and make voucher, at least remove the excuse, right? Of like, that the housing authority, that using and taking advantage of the voucher program is hard.
Well, it's not an excuse. It's real. It is challenging for landlords to utilize that program. That is one of the biggest issues that I've been raising for years. Our affordable housing crisis, I would state that challenge is one of the biggest reasons we have an affordable housing crisis. Inefficiency in running the Section 8 voucher program is one of the biggest contributors to our affordable housing crisis, and it should have been dealt with years ago. So landlords are not making that up when they say that. It is challenging.
Yeah.
I know landlords that have waited years, literally years, to get paid. So getting someone in leadership who believes in streamlining and efficiency and building a culture within the organization that puts people first is what's going to improve the housing authority. It's what's going to make for better relationships with landlords who do want to be part of this program and increase the availability of affordable units.
Sure, I mean, because the money's great, right?
Absolutely.
The voucher
That's
pays market rate, right?
That's right. So
Yeah.
why, if you think it from a business perspective, why wouldn't landlords want to participate in that program? Because they can't afford to wait months at a time to get paid. They can't wait for people not returning phone calls and not answering emails when inspections are due. They can't wait for their money. So we will improve our affordable housing situation in this city when we address the inefficiencies of our city housing authority.
So, I mean, do you have just for, and I know that these inefficiencies also apply to just work orders and whatnot for tenants. Do you have just maybe like 3 sort of big things, big changes that you think could be made in process-wise internally? And maybe that's a technology issue, I don't know, but I'm just wondering.
It's not a technology, it's a leadership issue. I mean, I can't state that enough. When you have leadership who is prioritizing making sure that units are ready to go, making sure that people's calls are being answered, putting people above contracts, you will see a difference. You will see a change in the quality of the housing that we have. You will see people wanting to be more connected to this program. I mean, I really cannot overstate that. That is one of the major issues, and it is one of the major contributors to our lack of affordable housing. I believe that wholeheartedly.
So do you see sort of within the organization, I mean, is it in maybe an apathetic workforce? Is compensation not good enough? Is workload too high? Is there
It's
just no
leadership.
accountability in the?
It's leadership, and we all know that leadership and the culture trickles down from the top. As a leader, I know that what I make important becomes important to my team.
I see.
Do you see
Okay.
what I'm saying? So if the leadership makes these things important, if leadership is making a priority of efficient returning phone calls, responding to landlords, responding to tenants, if leadership prioritizes that, it will trickle down into how management is prioritizing tasks, how management is deciding who does what. If there is chaotic leadership at the top, you will have chaotic programming at the bottom.
Yep, that makes sense. And this is sort of very specific because it's something that we are dealing with at Glen Hazel right now, and I'm sure across properties, is that through the pandemic with the eviction moratorium, lots of people got in arrears. And to the tune, at this point, to the tune, some people of tens of thousands. I mean, the idea that people were even allowed to get into arrears to that extent is upsetting. And I do understand that some folks, because they didn't re-up their income information, that they're getting charged the maximum, and so maybe there are places where that can be
There's inefficiencies
pulled
in
back,
the
right?
process.
But is there anything that, just from your understanding of, money that the housing authority has or whatever, where we can, just give people a clean slate, go through and make the adjustments in the arrears based on income changes that maybe haven't been reported. So I get that it's a person by person issue, but then also is there funding to or even the ability to just wipe the slate clean?
Well, I
for
don't know the
folks?
particulars of
Right.
the budget, first
Yeah.
of all. But secondly, people not reporting their income is not the problem. There are things that trigger people reporting their income. That is part of the process. So again,
Right.
inefficiencies in the process have
Right.
led to people being tens of thousands of dollars behind.
Yeah.
Right? So we can't always say it's the people. It's
No,
not
I
right.
understand. Yeah.
So
yeah.
this is why it's so important to get leadership who is prepared to look at the process. How is the process being managed?
Right.
How can we make it easier for our team, the internal team, as well as the residents and the tenants to do what's necessary to make these leases, to make sure the leases are being responded to properly, to make sure that letters and communications are being responded to correctly. And when they're not, there should be a system that connects with people before they're hundreds of dollars behind or thousands of dollars behind. Housing authorities across the country invest in strong social services within the agency to check and catch these issues before they get out of hand, to provide support to tenants. So first of all, they are on a trajectory to being able to move beyond the housing authority. We don't have strong social services connected to our agency, right? And so we're missing opportunities to first and foremost make sure people are in a position to be able to pay their rent on time, that the mechanism to pay rent is easy enough for people to not get behind, or when people come across challenges, that there is communication and a relationship in place that can catch it before it gets out of hand. This is what happens when there's inefficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I would love if every voucher holder or tenant, whether it's in a housing authority property or elsewhere, had essentially a case manager.
That's right.
And a one-on-one person
Yes.
that they knew that they could call, and it was always that person.
And it can't be the property manager.
No,
Right?
at
And
the
so
housing authority, right.
So,
Yeah.
there can't be property management within the housing authority. It needs to be a third-party social services team that is doing rental counseling, that is doing case management, like you mentioned. That case management piece is very important.
Yeah.
And that's a good business decision, right? Because now you have tenants who are more stable, which means more stable tenants are going to pay their rent more consistently. And also, people will begin to move through the system. All right. Another reason we have such a crisis is that people are staying in these units longer than they should be, right? Because what's next for them? People are hanging on to these units out of fear, because what else is there for them? But if we're counseling people into elevating and counseling people into becoming more independent of these subsidies, we wouldn't also have such a large crisis. I think that there are plenty of examples across the country of agencies that are utilizing social services to help people become more upwardly mobile, that are helping to mobilize people out of public housing, out of needing vouchers. And that's just not happening here.
Yeah, I mean, it is a Herculean task, though, I will say.
It
I mean,
absolutely.
even right now, Councilman Charlin mentioned the creating a tenant council. And I mean, I've seen that. What is being offered through the housing authority is not, I mean, it's sort of like, well, we came and had a meeting, but no one showed up, so they must not want a tenant council.
Well,
And
they
I mean,
don't show up because they don't trust the authority. People do this across the country, and they do it very, very well.
yeah, and right, like, and it takes months, like, to get I mean, just the tiniest thing of a tenant council takes months of weekly meetings and going through, and it's a very complicated process with lots of, but that's what it takes. It just takes
It
determination.
takes time, it takes trust,
Yeah.
and it takes consistency.
And I would say it takes, sort of an evaluation, when you're sort of evaluating, like, well, is this program effective? The evaluation should be, well, how many tenant councils, how many tenant councils did you create in the past year, right? And if the answer is 0, then that's not an effective program within, Okay, so I guess my last question is, again, with the understanding that this is a Herculean effort, and but you got to start somewhere. What role does the board play in that? What can the board do, as an organization, to make sure that this gets done, over the next, well, let's just say the next 3 years, so that in 3 years from now, we can come back and be like, wow, we have really seen a change?
I think the board has to be intentional about bringing leadership in that sees this as, that has the will to make these things happen. Someone who has had experience in making these things happen. Being really clear that whoever becomes the next leader of the housing authority is coming in with an understanding that we believe that people must be first. And that they have to demonstrate the ability to develop not just strong contracting and business acumen, but also a desire to see people becoming upwardly mobile. And while they are living in these units, while we are looking to increase landlord participation, that they have a strong sense of people. And I think that is of the utmost importance. And we need to hold people accountable. We have to make sure that we're bringing not leadership in that is prepared to invest the time and the resources into developing exactly what you're talking about.
So do you think that the board, I mean, would the board be in a position to, just for example, you know, we get a new leader to say, just for example, as a board, we want to see an X% increase in landlord participation within the first year, and if we don't see that, then, you know.
I think we have to be clear about what we expect.
Yeah.
We have to be clear about the challenges that we have today, and we have to be clear that whoever takes this role, that they know what our priorities are, so, which means we have to work together as a board. We have to make sure that we're getting the input from the folks who we're serving, and input from everyone with a vested interest, which would be all of you, and getting that input and making sure that we are communicating that properly to whoever the new leadership would be, and prioritize the changes that we want to see.
I would also sort of caution in that endeavor of accountability to, at least at the beginning, that the board include in that a concerted, because, you know, sometimes there can be fear, right? When you come, like, as a workforce, right? And someone comes in and is like, we're cleaning house, you know, we're gonna, you know, people get scared. And to, but to include in that process in that process evaluation, a very clear effort to sit down with the actual workers on the ground and be like, what is it that is making your job hard?
100%.
What is it that you need in order to be able, and what are your first, because I can't say, but I would bet money that the same frustrations that you see from the outside, most workers feel from the inside.
I could guarantee
as well.
it. I've talked to them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so do we want somebody to come clean house? We might. We might. Because the reality is we cannot continue with people who are not going to put people first. I believe that the Housing Authority has a large consortium of employees who wants to do the right thing by people, who are begging to do the right thing by people. Those are the folks we want to work with. But anybody who is not on that page should not be working with human beings who are the most vulnerable population of people in the city. And I stand on that 100%.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I appreciate your willingness to come back and help us hopefully house more people, right? I think that's our goal for cities, to have housing authorities. I appreciate that we have there's a lot of things to fix, right? And we also had the interviews yesterday where I think we covered a lot of these questions with other candidates for the board. And I'm not an expert on I was taking careful notes yesterday of my colleagues' questions, but of the different types of program and federal rules and the numbers of which rules and which forms and things like that. So I think that's, makes me feel confident that we've got board members coming in who really do know this stuff a lot better than I do, that's for sure. One of the things I get as a question from my residents is, I think, a little different sometimes than the questions I've heard so far, which is that there's a desire to destigmatize public housing, right? And because I've got people who will outwardly just say, I'm a socialist, I'm personally endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, right? And so the concept of social housing is slightly different than this kind of legacy we've inherited of public housing in the U.S., where we've mentioned dignity and not having stigma, but also having clean, sanitary, safe, subsidized housing. People want more of that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we talk about it in different kinds of policies, especially when you've got neighborhoods where you just see the cost of living increase so dramatically.
Yes.
People are like, you know what, I chose this neighborhood because I had diversity of income, diversity of race, diversity of age, diversity, period. And it's getting lost. So we have to fight and come up with new policies. Sometimes at the table I say here, it's a good thing that we have policies and programs to invest in disinvested neighborhoods. But then, there's really, I think, a different set of policies that we're still struggling with on how to moderate hyper and runaway investment. And, we don't want to facilitate playgrounds or concentrated wealth, let's say. If we are fostering concentrated wealth, we're also fostering concentrated poverty. Just because we have just a certain number of city footprint, right? And so, but that's a different challenge. And I don't think that the federal government has really given us great tools with housing authorities to do that. One of the things I've asked in previous discussions was about our fair cloth limit, that we're still under that. So our housing authority could own more property. It doesn't, because it's done so much of the kind of private partnerships. It actually, there's capacity, even under the 1991 fair cloth rules that were put in or something like that. We own less property than we did in 1991. So we could add some. And it was about a year or so ago, maybe more now, that the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh actually purchased a, let's say, 1980s style apartment in Lawrenceville because it was cheaper per unit than it would be to build new, even with the partnerships and the vouchers and all that kind of stuff. So that is a project I want to keep an eye on. And so I don't expect you to know about it. I think it was purchased when you were off the board. But would you be open to those kinds of things? So here's the thing. So that, to build new, oh my God, plus with commodity change, and we don't know what's going on with tariffs. You can't get concrete, you can't get steel, you can't get this, you can't get plywood or whatever. Costs are going up. It's already we just use rough math of $450,000 per apartment to build something new. But there are little apartment buildings for sale. I mean, I think this one was $250,000 per apartment. So that's a different model, but it's in a, because it's not fancy. There's no swimming pool or workout thing. And these are kind of probably haven't been fixed up since the 1980s, but there's nothing wrong with the building. It's definitely not the kinds of fancy finishes that Councilman Wilson was talking about a short while ago, where people would see it as a luxury apartment. But it still is a way to add units. I think it was something like 25 units. So would you be open to that discussion of saying, where are places in the city where we could add more wholly owned and operated housing authority?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, I think the fact that we haven't been focusing more on innovative and creative ways within the guidelines of HUD, of course, to figure out how to recycle property. Listen, I'm the board chair of Rising Tide Partners, right? We have purchased hundreds of units within the last 5 years that should have been purchased by the housing authority. That the city of Pittsburgh owns. I don't know how many units of vacant property that should have
Empty lots,
been
mostly.
used for, some creative and innovative ways to recycle land and get some of those units back online. So I am open to all innovative and creative ways to add units to our coffers that are within the guidelines of HUD. Absolutely.
Thank you. I think that's the kind of discussion, again, moving forward, that I would like to see at the Housing Authority Board.
Absolutely.
How do we, yes, we need to fix some of the clear problems that other members have talked about. And we need to bring up the substandard living conditions that residents are, rodents, fires, ceilings falling down, just really abhorrent.
Property management that doesn't care. Yes.
With the for-profit owners. So that's my big question, right? It's like, and as a challenge to the board and to the new board members, how do we both solve those problems, but also change the model so that there's less of those problems?
Yeah, I think the
moving
model,
forward.
You're right. I think the model is going to change. I think that HUD is going to be restructured. We don't know what that looks like yet, but I can almost guarantee that there will be some major changes
At the federal level?
at the federal level that will impact what happens to local housing authorities. I'm hoping that those changes will encourage some creativity and innovation because they're going to have to in order to stay an agency. I think we're going to have people who are willing to do things differently. We're going to have leadership who has the will to be innovative and creative and do things differently. But ultimately, someone who is always going to put the people first. And I do not believe that has been happening. So people first should be our motto. And everything and every decision and every development and every consideration around new housing has to center what's best for the people who need those units. And I mean, to me, that's just as clear as day. So yes, innovation, creativity is what is going to get us more units. And quite honestly, if we don't figure out innovation and creativity, we are going to be in a bigger mess than we are now from a housing perspective. So I think that the new appointees, what I know of them, they are a group of people who have also been advocating for housing changes for a very long time. And I'm excited to see what we can come up with together, but in concert and in collaboration with all the stakeholders. And there should be plenty of them. Stakeholders who also have these concerns, not just within their district, but as a city as a whole.
Okay, well, I'm going to let hand it over to Councilwoman Kell-Smith, because you said two of the things I think we really need to hear from all of our authority board members, which is that the residents are our residents too.
Absolutely.
I have often had to say, when I was upset with the direction authorities were going into, not the housing authority, that look, you're not, your customers are not on planet Mars.
That's right.
These
They're
are
right
our
here.
city residents.
Our neighbors, they live right next to
So
us.
we need to work together. And then you said also work with the stakeholders like City Council. And it will take a really coordinated effort.
Absolutely.
You cannot go running off in a different direction like sometimes our authorities, it feels
right.
like they're trying to do. So I'll stop there. I appreciate your time and thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman Gross, Mr. Chair. Tammy, you and I worked together before in Sheridan about 15 years ago, I think.
Maybe longer.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I've only been here, I don't know if I was elected or not. But anyway, between 15, 16
Yeah.
years, we worked together, and I had a lot of respect for everything you did, everything you said, because you said things the way they were. But I also am going to say things the way I am, because that's the way I am. I really think that Castor Binion has been a better director than any I've worked under before or worked with before. And I think that he and his team have been very responsive to our community. You know, Sheridan had a lot of issues with Housing Authority and a lot of anger and a lot of animosity about the things that happen in the community. So when Housing Authority comes in, they don't just represent their tenants. They're Pittsburgh's Housing Authority. And so they also have to work with our constituents around there. And in Sheridan, there's a lot of people that maybe they don't live in Housing Authority properties, but they're struggling too, and they just either haven't applied, don't apply, whatever reason. They sometimes just want peace in their community, and sometimes it's a Housing Authority property causing an issue for them. So I would want to make sure that those issues are also taken as seriously as possible, because it makes a safer, better neighborhood for everyone. And that's part of the problem, I think, in Sheridan. There never was like a transition when a lot of people moved from public housing into the community. And when you don't do that transition and you don't give people the tools and skills they need to live in a community, different than what they were accustomed to, then it creates all this tension.
I agree.
Yeah, it was really hard, a lot. And Kim in my office actually stopped more foreclosures. And she actually got, she was going to be held in contempt of court for running in and stopping somebody from losing their home. But she did a lot of it, more than a lot of the groups and organizations that we hired over the years to work in the community. And so for me, I love everybody that is out there doing the things for the community and trying their best, but not everybody has skills and abilities to do what needs to be really be done in a lot of different areas. But when you talk about the social services, that's something that really piques my interest, because I think that's a lot of the problems in Sheridan. But I don't know how. At one point, I thought we should merge City Housing Authority and the County Housing Authority so that we could put the services together. Including DHS and making sure the services are getting to the people. What would you do differently? If you were the director, what would you do differently that the last time you were on the board that you weren't pleased with? What would you do differently to get these services to people?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some serious community engagement, right? We have to start listening to the folks who need this housing. Right? We're making decisions, in an echo chamber. People who either have never experienced having to live in public housing, or people who may have worked and a touch here and a touch there. But the people who actually live and depend on this housing are the voices that we really need. We need to hear from them. What do you need to, one, make this housing better for you and your family? And secondly, what do you need to be able to exit this housing? This should not just be about creating generational housing, right? We've got to figure out, what do people need to be able to move beyond, right? Because otherwise people feel trapped in their house. People are trapped.
You're singing my song, so
I
I'm
mean,
just going to
it's-
because I
it's
said we're
real.
always so, in the city of Pittsburgh, I feel like we're constantly worrying about affordability, but we're not worrying about how we're getting people to pick any home they want to live in
We
and
have
to
to.
live
We
in
have
any
to.
neighborhood they want to live in.
Yeah.
And we're not giving them the tools and skills they need to make those moves and make those changes and,
And
to
the
take those steps.
opportunities, right?
And
Because
the
the opportunities have to be there
Yeah.
as well. People have the will. People want something different
Yeah,
for their
I
families,
agree.
but the opportunities have to be there.
I agree. And then well, the social services is a big thing for me, but also the when they talk about the tenant councils, even though there's some challenges with public housing, I went to a senior high-rise where the seniors were trying to organize, and I couldn't believe the pushback and almost like punishment that they were getting for doing that. I mean, and this is senior citizens, and they just feel like they almost like had to defy the management so that they could have a group of residents come together with and improving where they live. So I think that this is beyond, it seems to be just the style and how to manage, major properties, which is also, a concern overall, but has nothing to do with this issue. And then I did send some text messages because you talked about legislation for city council. And over the years, I remember we have been told, we couldn't legislate, things for the authorities. We couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. Well, I hired Dan Friesen in my office now, and he worked for the city. Now he's in my office. And he said council actually does have the authority to do it. And he showed me the code. So it was good to know and good to learn. So I would love to. And one of the things he and I talk about is creating something more like a a department of city development and merging like the URA and housing authority and those things together and putting the resources under one, so everybody's working together. And so I'm really going to look into that, to be honest with you, because I want to see what we can do to do things differently and do things better. I want to make sure we're making it better, not making it worse. But there's just a lot of different things. But the other thing I'm just going to ask you before I did ask the others this, I'm going to ask you, you have an organization, and do you receive any city dollars for your organization?
We have had partnerships we have an entrepreneurship program that was partnered with the URA at one point, but not currently.
Not currently. I don't know if it counts if it's the URA. I don't know. But there, in our code, you have to resign a seat. You can't take money and then serve as a director, a board
No,
member,
we're not.
or whatever.
We wish we were, but we're not.
You have to take a
receiving any.
pick which one you want to do.
Yeah, we're not receiving any dollars.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure, because it's the only thing I wanted to make sure and ask the ethic, for an opinion from ethics to make sure we're doing everything right. That's it. But I want to thank you for your willingness to serve. I worked with you a long time ago. I know you're a fighter for the community, and I'm glad to see you back and doing more things in the city.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. The benefit or the downside of going last is normally everything has already been said.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you for your time and for your willingness to come back. Because I know when you left, you had a very strong thoughts and remarks,
Absolutely.
and you were very candid about
Yes.
them. And so the fact that you're willing to come back, to me, also signals that you believe the housing authority is headed in a new direction, in an appropriate direction. And I said it yesterday, but a lot of what I've heard you talk about it today as well, but I heard it both yesterday and today, is that you really believe, and I'm not trying to put words in my mouth, so if I do, feel free to stop me, but that you really believe that the leadership cannot be disconnected from the people they serve, as well as the fact that all the decisions being made have to center the lives of those who are actually living in the properties.
I think that's true of all public service. For people who make a choice to serve in areas where they're serving all people, but more specifically the most vulnerable populations of people, they have to be human-centered at all times. They have to be intentional about finding ways to stay connected to the people they serve. Otherwise, you're just guessing what they need. You're thinking for them. In most cases, when you're way too far removed from the issues to make good decisions or to make decisions that are the best for the people. So I think in all public service positions and people who are choosing to work with vulnerable populations of people, you must empower them to tell you the things that you even don't want to hear, the things that are going to make your job harder. You have a responsibility to listen to them, which means staying connected and building strong, trustworthy relationships with them.
Thank you. It's also very encouraging for me to hear you speak about helping to empower residents to actually leave public housing.
Yes.
Because it was always meant to be sort of a bridge.
Yes.
A bridge from one place in life to another place in life. And I can remember, probably 10 years ago now, during a budget season when the housing authority was in front of us, and they got really upset at me because I said at the time, my job in many respects is actually help put you out of business.
Yes.
If I'm doing my job appropriately.
Absolutely.
And they were actually rather upset, say, no, we're in the business of, I said, no, actually, you're in the business of helping transition. But if I'm doing our job, if we're doing our job is to, in theory, eventually put you out of business. So,
the family self-sufficiency programs are a prime example of that. Every housing authority across the country receives family self-sufficiency funds. These are funds that are designed to develop programming that helps mobilize people to move forward. And if those programs are not implemented properly, you get people who stay in public housing for decades. And they don't deserve that. And the people who are on waiting lists waiting to get in don't deserve that. So there needs to be intentionality behind how do we house people affordably, securely, in a healthy manner for as long as they need it, while simultaneously preparing them to move to the next level. And we just don't do that well. We haven't done that well. And that needs to be a priority because that solves multiple problems. It helps families get more stable and move beyond their current condition, but it also keeps the availability of affordable housing. It keeps that availability. When we have people who are sticking and staying for long periods of time because they're not progressing forward, we get clogs in the system, clogs that we can't afford because you can't keep building more and more and more without addressing why are people not moving through in the way that it was originally intended to be. There's a lot of systemic issues connected to that, which is why I think it's important we can't just leave these issues to the housing authority. There's system issues that are keeping people in public housing and in Section 8 vouchers longer than they should be. Workforce, there needs to be opportunities that help move people to the next phase, and that just feels like there's been a clog there for an extended period of time. And we have to get serious about figuring out what the clog is, investing the money into building good programming. The Housing Authority should be partnering with entities and agencies that do these things well, and making this flow in a way that people are getting where they need to be. People who are waiting to get in can get in and not be on 5, 6, 7-year wait lists.
Okay. No problem. Then that means we've exhausted the business of this agenda and this interview, and therefore this meeting is adjourned.